And here's the thing. Has Rishi Sunak saved the economy? 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Right out the traps. We're going to open the lines immediately on this one. This is the winter economic plan. It's been unveiled. The furlough scheme has gone. A series of loan schemes remain. There are VAT incentives and a wage subsidy scheme in place. That's the scheme that will see the government top up the pay of people who can only work part-time hours in viable jobs. This word viable, hugely important in this statement. The closure of the furlough scheme at the end of October has sparked dire warnings of waves of redundancies over the coming months, but the Treasury is focusing its firepower on viable jobs, there it is again, rather than zombie ones, which do not have the same level of future. But what are the others? The full-time workers whose jobs are about to go, the 3 million self-employed, those who work in areas that cannot adhere to COVID-safe rules, as an obvious example. Is this you? 0344 499 1000. Worth reminding you, by the way, that this statement from Mr. Sunak earlier today, this replaces the planned November budget. Such is the serious nature of what we are talking about here. The budget has gone. This was what we are getting so far. Mr. Sunak claims the measures are fair and will put the UK economy on the right path to recovery against an uncertain and unprecedented backdrop. We've kind of slightly taken the leaf out of Germany's book in the template here. We've got around 5 million workers still receiving some or all of their income through the furlough scheme. That's costing 35 billion quid so far and counting. Many in the hospitality sector, pubs and restaurants have been warned they will be hit hard by new restrictions, of course. So does this go some way to address that? We'll talk to the head of UK hospitality a little later. 0344 499 1000. So let's have a summary here of Mr. Sunak's 3 principles for the job support scheme.
First, employees must work at least a third of their normal hours and be paid for that work as normal by their employer. The government, together with employers, will then increase those people's wages, covering 2/3 of the pay they have lost by reducing their working hours. Second, we will target support at firms who need it the most. All small and medium-sized businesses are eligible, but larger businesses only when their turnover has fallen through the crisis. Third, it will be open to employers across the United Kingdom, even if they have not previously used the furlough scheme. The scheme will run for 6 months, starting in November.
So if your profits have fallen during the downturn, man alive, that's an incredibly wide field, that one, isn't it? What does that mean, precisely? Your profits have fallen. Fallen by how much? Fallen from where to where? Is there some criteria on this? It's worth noting that the Chancellor will also be taking questions. At 3 o'clock, there'll be another statement. This will not be to the House of Commons, and as we understand it, journalists will be able to question the Chancellor there. So maybe we'll get some meat on the bones of this one. There will be losers. There will be losers. And we're all trying to get our head around this. This happened in the last 1 hour that the Chancellor stood up and gave this statement. From what you can gather, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for your job, your security, your future, or the company you own? This country does not succeed because of big multinationals. It succeeds because of small and medium-sized enterprises and businesses. That's the backbone of this country. And I can't help but think, and I can't proffer you with evidence at this point, but I can't help but think that they will be the very companies that will perhaps suffer most. I mean, again, that phrase, slightly haunting, zombie companies. So your profits have gone down. Why wouldn't they? We've just had a global, still in the midst of, we are told, a global pandemic. You've taken a bit of a hit. Last year, you turned over 100 grand as a company. This year, it looks like it's only going to be 50. Does that mean you're not a viable company? Does that make you a zombie company? What if you're self-employed? Think of people who do jobs like driving instructors. There's an obvious job that might be tricky. Does anyone want to sit shoulder to shoulder in a car with a stranger? That may well be a problem. And I would imagine there'd be plenty in that world that have taken the furlough scheme as the only option they could go for. If you are currently one of those people, will you be entitled to any of this? Well, you're self-employed. It's your own business. It's just a one-man band and a car. I doubt you would fall into the criteria of this. Now, I'm not advocating that the government just completely spend willy-nilly lots of money. After all, remember the phrase, the government don't have any money, they only have your money. So it's our money that's being spent, and it is, to quote Mr. Sunak, it's on us. It's on all of us, because we're all, well, to coin another phrase, in this together. It's our money, it's our government, these are our representatives. I don't know what he should have said, but to appease your own circumstances. But from what you're learning of what we've heard from the Chancellor, does this in any way address problems you have? I mean, I get it. I get the principle. The money tree, which we did kind of find the money tree, didn't we? The elusive money tree. And of all parties to find it, it was the Conservatives. They found the money tree. For years, they've been advocating, sort of David Icke style, it doesn't exist. And then it kind of pitched up during COVID. It's the money. It does exist. It's real. And there it was. But the money tree has not been watered that much of late, it seems, because we've had no functioning economy in the conventional sense. But where does this specifically leave you? Has Rishi Sunak saved the economy, or has he just kicked a rather dangerous can further down the road? 0344 499 1000. Think about your own business, your own situation. I was talking to a black cab driver last night. I took one of London's finest on the way back from the dentist, and he was a smashing fella. We were talking about bus lanes. I'd never heard of the term bus gates. Have you heard of this? There's another bus gate there, he said. Well, why did I not know this? That's a bus gate. So it's like a bus lane, but it's... Anyway, black cabs cut. So at a time when the capital city, like other cities, but bearing in mind that you consider the capital city, whether you like it or not, London is a quarter of the country's GDP happens in that city. So black cab drivers suffering, and lots of other industries I know, I'm just specifically talking about this one area, suffering really badly at the moment. There's no one around. I remember walking down Piccadilly. It was like 28 days later. I mean, it was just extraordinary. This was sort of back in a sort of April time, rush hour, no one around. You could walk down the road. You could walk around Piccadilly Circus in the road. There was no one around. So an already tough job. And then the Mayor of London, God bless his little cotton socks, decides to make it even more difficult by closing off lots of roads that, for some reason, black cabs are not seeing as part of the transportation industry. That's curious. I can understand why I shouldn't be allowed to drive in the bus gate. Surely surface transportation, including cabs, should. My point being is that politicians aren't always that good at working out what it needs to get the working man or woman back on their feet. So at a time when black cabs were suffering, the Mayor of London closes more roads and makes an already difficult job even harder. I mean, you couldn't make that up. Who the heck is advising the man? And I apply a similar logic to what's happened today. Now, I know that not everybody can be helped. I know that the magic money tree cannot be magic forever. I get that. I understand it. You haven't got to be an expert or have a PhD in economics to understand that there's got to be give and take, and there will be losers as well as winners, etc. But what I am interested in is your own position on this. Do you consider this business of the government stepping in and paying a third of the salary? So when you're on in a way, I suppose, to put it in layman's terms, it's kind of like the furlough scheme, but you've got to go to work for it, whereas before you didn't have to go to work for it. And it might be that your company, well, they could survive, but they can't survive paying you full time. So they can't pay you for 40 hours a week, but they can pay you for 20. But don't worry, if you come into work, your company will pay a third of your wages, and the government will pay the other third. So you'll get paid 2/3 of your wages for going back to work. That's probably good for your head because you're back. It's good for the company. It means they're not going to fold. They just haven't got the resources to pay full-time workers. And one would assume it's got to be good for the wider economy. That's the theory behind it. The more pressing question of all of this is, how many companies will it not apply to? How many businesses will not be able to claim this? The zombie versus viable scenario, which is kind of where we're at on this. That's going to be intriguing. What is the criteria for that? But the wider question, do you think you heard Mr. Sunak speak? Has he saved the UK economy? For now, 0344 499 1000. What has it done for you in your job? Painting, decorating, building, electrician, retail, plumber, whatever you happen to do for a job, architect, any other area of everyday life that keeps this country ticking. Where does this leave you? And I'm aware, by the way, and I'm really aware of this because I've had experience of trying to get a bloke out to fix my dishwasher at the moment. Snowed under, mate. Snow can't move. It's like, what? Who broke all the dishwashers? Rishi Sunak? What's going on? How did that happen? And builders, anyone in the building trade, seem to be incredibly busy right now. Let's speak with Joe Michel, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of West of England, and Julian Jessop, an independent economist, of course, a regular with us here on the programme. Julian, you're usually rather optimistic about the future economically of the country. What are you making of this?
Well, I think the announcements today are the lesser of several evils. I think most people would agree that the furlough scheme couldn't continue in its current form. It was no longer appropriate to subsidise large numbers of people, to do nothing when the economy is slowly getting back to normal and the labour market is starting to show signs of recovering. So I think the old scheme had to go. The question was what would replace it. I personally would have preferred something a bit more targeted at those particular businesses and sectors that are most at risk at the moment. So whether that's hospitality or certain types of retail or possibly local lockdowns, those businesses that are hardest hit by them. But the new scheme that's come out today at least seems to be reasonably well designed. It's not overly generous. Those people that can't work their full hours will only be paid 2/3 of what they would otherwise have got. I think it provides the right incentives for employers to let people go or workers to move on if there genuinely isn't a prospect of keeping them in employment. But on the other hand, it will tide many businesses and employees over until this period ends and things can get back even closer to normal. So I think he's probably just about got the balance right.
Interesting distinction. I was just going to say, Julian, this distinction between viable jobs and zombie jobs. I mean, who makes that call?
Well, in effect, this has been the decision there is being pushed onto employers and employees because employers are going to have to continue to top up the wages of people who are only working, say, 1/3 of their normal hours. There's an incentive for them not to hoard labour. Equally, because employees will potentially be only getting 2/3 of what they would normally be getting. If they can find a better opportunity elsewhere, then they can move on as well. So I think in terms of the incentives, it is quite well designed. Many people won't be happy with it, but I think, as I say, it's better than the alternative.
Joe Mitchell, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of West England. Afternoon to you, Joe. Nice to have you with us. Just give us an overview firstly on what you made of the Chancellor's statement.
Well, I welcome new measures. It was inevitable and necessary that those measures were introduced. However, I don't think they go far enough. And where I disagree with Julian is that the economy is not currently moving back to normal. It's moving the other direction since the new regulations were brought in, the rule of six, and the sense that probably tighter restrictions are on the way. The sense that we're moving back towards normal is absolutely incorrect. What we're now seeing is, finally, I think the realization is dropping that this isn't a short-run political crisis to be managed as a short-run political issue. It's a long-run health crisis, and we don't know how long this is going to go on for. There was no reason to believe the virus would just somehow disappear over the summer and we could all go back to normal. So we're not moving back to normal, and so the policy response needs to reflect that. Where I also disagree with Julian is on the incentives. I think actually the design where the employer has to contribute to hours that are not worked. So the employer has to pay some money towards wages for hours not worked, provides an incentive for some employers to hoard skilled labor. People who really want to, businesses who really want to hang on to their good skilled workers will pay that premium to keep them. For anybody else who think, well, I can hire and fire kind of at will and I could just replace these people in the future at some point, that incentive structure says fire, get rid of them. So we're going to see a big wave of redundancies. We're going to see, up to hundreds of thousands, possibly millions additional unemployed, I think, as a result of this change. And it comes as the economy is weakening, not improving.
Julian, can you come back on that point?
Yes, well, in 2 points. I mean, I think the economy is continuing to recover towards a normal. It's not necessarily the old new normal, but it's a new normal. I think what's happened in the retail sector is a good example here. Obviously, bricks and mortar retailers have been hit very hard by the pandemic, but overall consumer spending is essentially back to pre-COVID levels because people have been happy to switch to online spending and other ways of entertaining themselves. And I think, therefore, there'll be no strong case for supporting people to work for businesses if customers don't want them anymore. In terms of the incentives, I mean, frankly, it's a sad thing to say, but unfortunately, part of the process of recovery is often that some people do sadly need to lose their jobs. Hopefully, of course, to find new ones. Now, I personally think a lot of this money would be better spent supporting people who are temporarily unemployed, for example, by topping up universal credit, or maybe also helping them to retrain for new opportunities, particularly in areas like social care, where we know that there are lots of shortages. But if the incentive that firms have is to unfortunately get rid of people who they no longer need, then I think that's part of the healthy process of adjusting to the new normal. There will be a lot of turmoil in the market. Unfortunately, a lot of people will lose their jobs, but we have a flexible economy, a flexible labour market. We're pretty good at creating new jobs to replace those that are lost.
And Joe Mitchell, I mean, we keep hearing that this is kind of taking a leaf out of the German book. What are you making of that?
Key difference here is that the Germans don't have this included element where employers pay a contribution for hours not worked. So that's why you get a very different incentive structure in Germany. Germany also has quite a different relationship between unions, employers, particularly big corporations, and workers. And I think trying to just extract that one little bit of the system and plug it into, as Julian said, what economists call flexible labour markets, really what they say is insecure labour markets where you can get fired easily and quickly.
So this is is this a version, Joe, of a furlough scheme, but instead of not working, you're working?
I think in a way this is a sort of semi-extension of the furlough rather than what the Germans call a short-term working scheme, because it doesn't provide incentives to move people to shorter hours rather than make them unemployed. What it does is sort of it gives incentives either to hang on to a small number of people and get rid of the rest. So I think it is a kind of not an imperfect extension to the furlough.
Let me just ask you both then as a final point. Julian Jessop, who are the biggest losers here?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the people who are going to benefit or not benefit from this scheme. I think, as others have said, it's not so much the people who have sort of good relationships with an existing employer who are at risk here. It's often people like the self-employed, for example. It's those people who might be trapped in one way or another in long-term unemployment. And I think, therefore, that all of these announcements need to be seen in the context of everything else that is going on. I think, today was a small positive, but there might still be lots of other things the government needs to do in other areas.
And Joe Mitchell, same question to you. Who do you think has lost out most on this?
The losers are the same people who've lost out for the last 10 years of austerity, the people who are in insecure, low-paid jobs, not people with big corporations with long-run relationships and skills and so on, that they've sort of built up a relationship with their employer. Many employers will do the right thing here, but some simply won't be able to. And it'll be those at the bottom who've been on the sharp end of economic policy for the last 10 years who are going to feel the pain worst here.
Good work. Thank you, guys. Joe Mitchell, Associate Professor of Economics, University of West of England, and Julian Jessop, the independent economist, was the other voice you heard. Are you one of those people that have lost out as a result of this? 0344 499 1000. Are you sensing that for some reason of all the schemes and the initiatives and the policies that have been put into place, it completely swerves your circumstances? Somebody said, who's going to pay the mortgage if you don't fall under certain criteria for some benefits, whether that's universal credit, whatever it happens to be? Where does that leave you, and what's your trade doing? Conversely, by the way, I'm bound to ask, because I think it's just interesting to keep it as a bit of a thread. Are you doing okay out there? Because lots of people certainly are.